Hello, I'm Anthony. Welcome back to the Cherry Audio Mercury-6 tutorial series. This is the last episode in the series, and today I'm going to try to accomplish two tasks in one. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the effects units. I don't propose to spend too much time talking about it because effects are generally fairly intuitive, but I'm also going to do a preset deep dive where I deconstruct this preset. This one's called Apple Crate Solo, to show you how I go about understanding and figuring out how instruments work, how we pull together all of the stuff that we've learned in the earlier episodes of the series. If you've enjoyed this series and you'd like to help support my channel, check out the Patreon and YouTube channel member links below. That's an awesome way to do it. Okay, here's the sound. As we can see, it's a split layer sound, so one of the most important things when you're deconstructing or doing these preset deep dives is to figure out how many different sounds you're working with, how many different voices, how that architecture's laid out, and throw as much stuff away as you possibly can so that you can get down to the individual grains of functionality. Because we've got a split layer sound here, a really simple thing for us to do is to enter solo mode. That's going to throw half the sound away before we even started. That's just the upper layer. Another very easy win is to turn all the effects off. We have an enable button in the effects unit, so let's have a quick wander through the effects bank first and then we'll get back to our preset deep dive. Got some global settings, and on the left hand side we have a master enable button, so that's for everything. So now that's what the raw upper layer sounds like all on its own without any effects. To the right of the enable button, we've got this feature called FX mode. You can either be in layer, which means that each individual layer, the upper and lower layer, have their own completely independent FX units. That's really easy to demonstrate by toggling between the two different layers. Have a look at these buttons that are coming on. In the lower layer has chorus, delay and reverb. The upper layer has those, but also this distortion unit, basically got independent effects. If I switched over to global mode though, now they're both using the upper layer settings, or basically identical settings. There's one set of effects units for both layers. So we have layer mode here. Let's turn the effects back on so that we can hear what we're doing. And now I'll give you a quick run through the 5 different effects banks. We've got these tabs across the top, and these correspond to the different types of effects. So here we have our distortion unit, which is currently on, set to tube mode. If I turn the enable button off, you can see the tab de-highlights, and when I go back over to the global tab, that's also turned off as well. Well, let's listen to just the distortion on its own. Really nice gritty distortion. There's the drive. Everything else is really self-explanatory. Over to the flanger or chorus, so this is a dual function control. In this case though, we have chorus engaged. If I turn the flanger on, you can see feedback controls, which are only really applicable to flanger. Sometimes you see choruses with feedback, but it's not really for the purist. Chorus doesn't have feedback, as you can see. Those features have been disabled. Let's turn this on. Turn the distortion off. There's our chorus on. Delay is delay. Everyone knows what delay sounds like. This is a ping pong delay bouncing across the stereo spectrum. And finally reverb again. Really straightforward. So this is so intuitive. This is why I'm rattling through it, because these controls, that they're really understandable. They're really intuitive. Galactic is the biggest of the reverbs. This is Cherry Audio's own bespoke algorithm. So you're going to get this cavernous reverb. It's set quite dry. That's just dialing more of it in. And back over to the global tab. Turn the ones on that we were left with. And that's all 4 units on simultaneously. Let's turn them all off. Have a look at the layer itself. And now we want to go about deconstructing this upper layer to figure out how it makes it sound. Now you can do preset deep dives constructively or destructively. Start off with the simplest atomic thing and build everything up, or start with the complete sound and take things away, and they're both absolutely fine and I use them both regularly in my deep dives. Let's take the reductionist perspective on the synthesizer, because so many different features are kind of all entwined with each other. It's a little bit difficult to pull everything away and bring everything in one at a time. So we'll do it the other way around. But we should start off with an examination of the oscillators. They're the most important things. So in VCO1, we've got triangle and pulse. Now at the moment, it's mixed mostly to 2. I'm just going to pull all the way across to 1 so that we can just hear VCO1 on its own. And that's the combination of triangle plus pulse. Now if we're dealing with pulse, we also need to bear in mind that we have pulse width modulation to consider as well. So let's jump across and have a look at that. And indeed, we do have pulse width modulation, 16% of it, and this is being modulated in turn by the LFO. So this is where we're focusing in on a single feature of the synthesizer now. The best thing to do is to crank in loads of this effect, find out what it's doing, and then pull it back. So I always take a note, it's 16.2%. You could create yourself little way station presets as well, so that you can get back to this stage whenever you want. But I'll just take a note that it's 16.2. And then there's more of that pulse width modulation being brought in. It's the LFO. Let's jump across there. Here's our rate, basically every 4 seconds. And that's what's giving us that pulse modulation sweep. And if we take it up too far, the pulse width is either hitting 0 or 100%, whatever your perspective is, but you can hear it kind of basically pinching off and then coming back. So the trick with pulse modulation is to not let it get to that stage unless you specifically want it. There we go. Nice little bit of modulation. And then the basic pulse width that everything else is going to be based on is this 72.6. So let's take away the LFO and I'll also disable the triangle. So there's the actual width of the pulse. And I really like to use these visual aids to always give me a helping hand to try to figure out what's going on with the wave. It makes understanding and manipulating them so much easier if you understand what a wave both looks like and sounds like, and you compare those two things together. And here's the modulation coming in now, and there's the wave getting wider and narrower. So we've got all of that going on, as well as the triangle wave, which is a nice simple triangle wave. Now it's a nice simple triangle wave that's going up and down in volume. So we've obviously got some tremolo effect, which means the LFO is being applied to the amplifier. Let's jump over there. Sure enough, here's the LFO applying its volume modulation to the amplitude. There's more of it, and there's less of it. And now we'd have a static triangle. Take the PWM away again, and there's our basic shape. Take that away as well. And then those two modulation effects, both dialed in. Anything else interesting to look at in the oscillators? Well, yes, very much. The range knob is set to 16 foot plus 7 semitones. In other words, we're going to be generating perfect fifth intervals when played against VCO2. Now you can't hear that at the moment, but if I press a C on the keyboard, you're getting a G on the tuner. There's your plus 7 semitones. If I turn the mixer all the way to oscillator 2, play my C, there is C. So it's a higher pitch because this is at 8 foot. And this is where perspective can really mess with your head, because technically the difference between those two notes is actually a perfect fourth. The oscillator 1 is 5 semitones below oscillator 2, but it's all a matter of perspective. That's why fourths and fifths are almost interchangeable. That's why they're called perfect. Subtract either of them from 12 and you'll get the other one. So let's bring both oscillators back in and we'll hear that perfect fifth slash fourth. There it is. Oscillator 2 is generating this simple triangle wave, but it's got a tuning offset of 9.8%. So not only have we got this perfect interval between them, fourth or fifth, whatever your perspective is, there's also a 10% semitone detune, which is basically going to give you a genuine kind of tonal offset, particularly when it's played against the lower layer, which we'll bring in later. So if I set this to 0, that's a much cleaner perfect interval. And there's that little bit of harmonic distortion in there, it's nice. The only significant modulation being applied to the filter is coming from envelope 1. Here's the slider, here's the button. So here's the envelope with almost minimal attack, basically none. Decay of 600 milliseconds, decaying down to this quite low sustain point at 33%. Every note that we play, we're going to get a dramatic filter sweep. It's happening so quickly, it's a little bit difficult to identify, so let's bring in more decay. And there's the filter sweep now. Watch it in the spectrum analyzer, play the note, and there are all the high frequencies being cut away by this much. Just brought the sustain down there to accentuate it a little bit more. Bring that back up again. Done a lot of butchery to that sound. Let's just throw the preset away, jump back to it. There's our basic sound again. And now we'll enter solo mode again, and this time just listen to the lower panel. And again, I'll turn the effects off. So this is a simpler sound, and we certainly don't have that that interval, that perfect fifth interval that we had for the upper layer. Let's have a look at the oscillators. So this time we've got a 4-foot range, so we're playing much higher, and triangle and square wave. Turn the mixer down so that we're just hearing oscillator 1. And let's just zoom in on that frequency so we can see that nice and clearly. So that's our triangle being mixed with the square wave, and there's obviously modulation as well. Quick look at the LFO, similar kind of thing. Quite a slow rate, still at 0.27. Tiny little bit of pitch modulation. This is actually the case for upper layer as well. Didn't mention it specifically, but all of these settings, they look like they're kind of reasonably high, but they're all actually at 0.01%, which is a tiny, tiny amount, but it's not zero. All of these things are having an effect. So we've got a tiny little bit of pitch modulation, and here's our tremolo effect, the VCA amplifier LFO dialed in just the same way that it was with the upper layer. That's what's making the wave dance up and down. And that tonal colour that's coming in, when I first play the note, we've got a complex shape being drawn, and then it simplifies itself out. That's the filter. Over the period of this 2.5 seconds, the decay down to a less gentle filter from envelope 1. So very similar construction in terms of the oscillators. We're using different oscillator types. BCO2 is a pulse wave, tuned 2.6%, very gentle detune. And as far as the effects are concerned, let's have a listen to those on their own. So here's our chorus. It's set quite low in the mix, but it really is having an effect. If you turn that chorus off, it's much drier. This time we've got a straight digital delay, not the ping pong that's going on. So the two layers are playing against each other. It's the comparison between the two that makes so much of this dynamic content. Each layer in their own, perfectly interesting, they're all fine. But when you add these two things together, that's where the real good stuff happens. So that's the standard stereo delay. Turn that off. And more galactic reverb. They're probably the same values as the upper layer. Let's have a quick look between them. Yep, those settings are identical for both units, so they're using identical galactic reverb settings. Throw the entire preset away one more time. Quick look at the Portamento. We've got a very fast Portamento on here, which really matters. I turn that off. Need to do it on both layers, don't I? There we go. Really dramatic impact it's having on the sound. It's just one button, but it's an important one. Personally, I would have pushed the pan a little bit further. You can see the upper layer is very slightly panned to the right. The lower layer is actually dead center, or tiny amount, -1.2. So when I was playing with this preset, I just accentuated those a little bit more. I do like my pan. And that'll do us for the preset deep dive and for this series. Hope you enjoyed it. Please hit like if you did. I'll see you for the next one. Thanks very much.